What's going on, everybody? Josh McCarty here with Stokes, and we are here for another edition of NBA Chat, title to be determined. So we're just going to go with that for now. We did not come back for the second round. By the time we were able to record, the second round was very much in progress. So we decided we would just hold off until the conference finals. Stokes, we are here. It's been a very fun playoff so far, somewhat unpredictable in some ways, and other ways as predictable as we thought, Eastern Conference. So just in general, well, first, Stokes, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's a nice night. The weather's nice around here, and just excited to talk some more basketball. It's a playoff basketball. These playoffs have been really fun. There haven't been a lot of close games, but there's been a lot of drama in a general sense throughout these playoffs.
Yeah, it's wild. Like even the Nuggets and Timberwolves series, which I think by a lot of accounts is like so far the series of the playoffs, just by how intense it was. And every game felt like a blowout. There was a
Yeah.
running joke like game 7 should have either been Nuggets by 25 or Timberwolves by 32. It shouldn't have been that close of a spread. And then you're looking at a situation now, Stokes, where we're in the conference finals and there's no LeBron, there's no Joker, there's no Steph Curry. You start looking around, there's no Embiid, although he started, it's not super surprising given the way his season, and there's no Jalen Brunson. Some of these stars, these household names in the sport, were not there. We do have Luka, we do have Tatum, we do have Brown. Is there a larger conversation here about the parity of the league? Because baked into all of that is the fact that only one of the one seeds made it to the conference finals, the Boston Celtics. Other than that, we have a 6 seed in the Pacers, a 3 seed in the Timberwolves, and a 5 seed in the Mavericks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a testament to the parity in the NBA because like even the Western Conference, the top three seeds were separated by a single game. So all those teams were neck and neck. The only the Celtics really they separated themselves throughout the season. So when you look at the West, when we talked about it, even we I'm pretty sure someone said that no matter what would have happened in any of the series, we could see it going either way. You could justify it somewhat. And in the East, there's so many unpredictable things, like whether it's injury, whether it's just people having a bad or an off night. Only the Celtics, like, you could have looked at in the first two rounds and thought, hey, like, they were going to run through whoever they face. Like in all the other series, it's who has a good couple of games, and along those lines, like who's going to get hot, and also war of attrition, who's going to stay healthy.
Very true. And it's so funny because the Celtics actually, in both of their series wins so far, they split the first 2 games at home. And that historically is considered a massive win for whatever road team is in the series. If you could split those first 2 games at home, and the odds makers never blinked. In fact, there was a period in time where I hit your DM. The Celtics had lost one of the first 2 games at home to Cleveland. So they split 1-1 going back to Cleveland. At that same point in time, the Nuggets had just lost both home games in Minnesota. The second one was just a thrashing. And despite losing both home games, going to Minnesota versus Cleveland, who stole a game on the road, coming back home, the Nuggets were prohibitively stronger favorites. They were both underdogs at that point, but the odds on the Nuggets were way shorter than the Cavaliers. So Vegas is not giving us anything with these Celtics. They're like, if you want to bet on the Celtics to make it to the finals, you're going to have to pay. You're not going to get any kind of a discount on our half.
Yeah, they in all the games they were just heavy favorites. So I think even when they went back to Cleveland, they were about 9 point favorites, and then of course Donovan Mitchell didn't play in Game 4, so they were even higher. And I think Game 5 they were about 15.5 point favorites. Like the odds makers, they feel like the Celtics are just special right now, and although they're at times they're playing with their food, but when they're locked in, it's scary to watch.
So what I want to do tonight, Stokes, is just for those of you that are listening, we are recording this on May 24th. Game 2 of Timberwolves and Mavericks is in progress. It is coming up on halftime. The Timberwolves are up 57-40 right now, by the way. The Pacers have a 2-game 0 lead on the Celtics. I want to talk about both these series, where we think they're at right now. what we think this looks like going forward to the finals. But since we didn't get a chance, Stokes, to talk about the second round in a preview sense, I do kind of want to touch on each of the four teams that lost just in a quick fashion, like what their future looks like. Is this a situation where this was like a last step of their window? I know we want to hit hard on the Knicks because I think nationally they're a pretty big story. We'll talk about the Nuggets. The Cavaliers conversation is probably a much quicker one, I think. I think it really comes down to, are they going to keep their star player or not? And then after that, Oklahoma City, which I think will also be a fairly interesting conversation. But let's start off with the Eastern Conference Finals, Stokes, the Pacers and the Celtics. And I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Is this series over?
Yeah. If so, they're playing every other day, and with Tyrese Halliburton having a hamstring injury, I think that there's no reason to expect him to be anywhere near full strength by tomorrow. And they're already down two. Like, had they split, had they not given up or ruined their opportunity in game one, you think that, hey, maybe, because they've been really good in their home court. They haven't lost there. So but they also need their best player. I could see this being like a 3-1 when they go back to Boston, just based on it's a home crowd. Maybe they get it tomorrow and they rally around their bench players. But this is looking like another 4-1 series ender in Boston.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's such a bummer. I was rooting for the Pacers. And then I really feel like, and you don't want to say it came down to one game, but when you look at what these two teams were going against coming into the series, you had the Pacers, who had a knockdown, drag out 7-game series with the Knicks. And now they're on the road, game one in Boston, against a Celtics team that kind of took their foot off the gas. They got to rest after taking care of the Cavs fairly easily in a gentleman's sleep, if that's what you want to call it. And I know that's not the official one because the one they lost was at home, but you get the idea. They didn't really have to push too hard to beat the Cavs. And you just look at what these two teams have done in the playoffs so far. The path for the Pacers has been harder. And I was just fully expecting a Celtics blowout win game one. And we got the direct opposite, Stokes. With about 10 seconds to go in regulation, it looked like the Celtics were going to lose that game. The Pacers literally had to just avoid what happened, which was turning the ball over late and then giving up a 3-point to Jaylen Brown. What a moment for him, for a guy that last season, the narrative just couldn't wait to talk about how he wasn't a big-time player. I wonder how those Celtics fans are feeling now. Where would they be without Jaylen Brown? But I'm with you. The Celtics are so far 4-0 in the playoffs at home. And to me, Halliburton is the straw that broke the camel's back, because I think he's probably going to play, although based on what Shams said today, it makes me think that there's at least some pessimism, because hamstrings are one of those deals where it's not like you can just take a shot. Your hamstring is either good or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much you can do medically to just fix it. And the amount of explosion it takes in basketball, he missed 10 games with the same hamstring injury earlier this year. So what a bummer. To me, I'm bracing for a 4-game sweep. And I think it would be such a disappointing way for this Pacers team to have their season end, because I think, Stokes, at full health, this Pacers team had a puncher's chance to fight with Boston. And I wouldn't have picked them to win the series. I would have picked them to steal a game or two, because I think to beat the Celtics with the rosters that are available to you in the Eastern Conference, you need variance. You need what happened with the Heat last year, where you get on a heater. Unfortunately, for Knicks fans like yourself, you need what happened in Game 7, where the Pacers just don't miss. And the Pacers create more wide open shots than anybody in the entire sport. It is a skill that they get so many wide open shots. And that's why their shot variance can be so volatile, is because when you get open shots, you have a chance to go on a heater like they did against the Knicks, and they just run them out of the building. And the Knicks are just like, you guys are never going to miss. I think the Pacers could create games like that, but without Halliburton, the straw that stirs the drink there, it's just a bridge too far for me. So I'm aligned with you, Stokes. So I think it would be shocking if this series ended up not being the Celtics. Jaylen Brown did not make an all-NBA team. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Brown at this point in time? Where does he rank in the NBA hierarchy?
I think he's in an unfortunate spot. He gets downgraded because the Celtics are so good. but at the same time, he doesn't get any of the benefit for being a good player. So it's like the Celtics are too good because they have all these good players, but in the end, like, he's one of those good players, but he doesn't get the credit for it. So it's a real big conundrum in that spot. But I mean, there are times where he is the go-to player for that team, and like Jason Tatum, if I was building a team, obviously he would be the guy I would prefer, of course. But it just seems like he is the more aggressive player when you're watching them in the games. So at times it seems like he is the 1A and not necessarily the 1B. But I would say that he's probably in the top 15 as far as players in the NBA. He just didn't really get the accolades this year, and I think he was just an unfortunate loser in the fact that the Celtics won so much.
In game two, Rick Carlisle made kind of a controversial decision. In the fourth quarter, he basically went to the end of his bench, and Siakam came out with about 9 minutes left and never went back in the game. They were down by 13 to start the fourth quarter. Now, Rick Carlisle did have the knowledge in his mind that Tyrese Halliburton was not going to re-enter that game. A lot of folks are saying Rick Carlisle waved the white flag. You could take it in a way that he knew he wasn't getting his best player back. Maybe in a series that you've already mentioned, it's every other day, maybe getting 12 minutes of rest for his key guys, knowing they're already battling fatigue, was worth more than looking for like a heroic comeback in Boston without your best player when you're already down by double digits. What did you make of that? Because it's not going over well, at least in the betting community, but it's not going over well for a lot of old school NBA fans either.
Uh, yeah. I think or feel that like you're not giving your team the best opportunity to win. Like a 13-point difference is with the type of offense that you have, that is not a huge difference. Like you can get 2 or 3 straight threes and 3 open threes and be good and be right back in that game. So I probably wouldn't have done it, but when my trainer says, "Hey, Ty's not coming back this game," and you're down 13 points, it's like, well, do I want to have all these guys expend all this energy knowing that we've got to fly back home and we got to get ready for Saturday, and give our guys the best chance to win? Maybe that makes sense, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't tell my team, "Hey, we're giving this up," because now we have to win 4 out of 5 games against what has been the best team in the NBA after we should have won game one. So I think that all those things working in against him or them, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I can also explain it.
Yeah, see, I'm with you. I think I understand the logic, but also there's not going to be a perfect scenario where you're feeling great about beating the Celtics. And yes, you're without your best player, but at least give your players a chance to fight. It's the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, come on, go out there and fight. One last question for you. Kristaps Porzingis, he had a calf injury in round 2 against the Cavs. A lot of reporting has him on target to come back as early as game 4 in this series. If this series goes the way that we think it will go, even if the Pacers were to steal game 3, but Halliburton looks like he's hobbled, would you be tempted, if you were the Celtics, to try to have your cake and eat it too? Let Porzingis rest that calf, because the NBA Finals does not start until June 6th. The last time Porzingis was on the court was May 13th. You could buy him essentially 23 days of non-game action by holding him out to the finals. You're rolling the dice because that's maybe arguably your third best player you're just not having on the court. But as a fan of the Nuggets, who saw what happened when you have a star player hampered by a calf injury, I can tell you, if you could have told me you could buy Jamal Murray 2 extra weeks of rest, I would have signed for whatever I could have to get that done. What do you do if Kristaps Porzingis?
I think it'll probably hinge on game 3, in my opinion. I think if the Celtics win game 3, I go ahead and continue to sit them, because then, okay, if we don't kill them in game 4, we're gonna kill them game 5. But if they if they lose game 3 and he's good enough to play, I'd probably play him in game 4 just to show them that different look, just for them to have to prepare for something else, just to try and get that other game so we can put them away at home in game 5. So that would be how I would look at it. But um, the thought of, hey, we have controlled this series. We're the better team. Our calf injuries, they can be tricky. So I can see the thought process in just letting him continue to rest all the way through, especially if you have the continuity in how things are going right now with the team. Like they haven't lost a game on the road yet this postseason. Now maybe that starts tomorrow, or but if there's an opportunity to make sure Kristaps is 100% healthy for the next round, then maybe you don't take that risk.
Particularly if you look at the fact that you could be matched up with Minnesota, who just can throw two very high level bigs at you in Towns and Gobert. Speaking of Minnesota, Stokes, let's talk about the other series, the Western Conference Finals. You and I are pretty aligned on the Eastern Conference Finals. Game 1 went to the road team, the Dallas Mavericks, and game 2 is underway right now, and we have a 60-48 halftime lead for those Timberwolves. All right, Stokes, what's your feel on this series? How much are you reading into game 1? Do you have a strong lean either way on either of these teams?
Not really. I feel like the I feel like the Timberwolves are the better team. I think that the rest of their roster is just deeper than than the Mavericks roster, and but with the Mavericks, their top two I would trust more than the T Wolves top two. I just have trouble trusting Cat. As talented as he is, like he's just so inconsistent. He can't stay out of foul trouble for whatever reason. But if it's Ant versus Luca, I mean, I still think Luca's the better player, but he's not far off. But I would trust Kyrie much more than I would trust Cat. The way Kyrie can affect the game, and the way he can make such bad shots look easy. He is just an incredible player.
So I agree with you. I think these teams are pretty even. I think I'd have a hard time if you told me to list out the best 4 players in this series in order from 1 to 4. That'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? I think we'd have to go Luca 1, right?
Yeah.
And then I'd go Gobert 4.
Okay.
I like Gobert. See, I watched Gobert through a Nuggets lens, Stokes, and he never has anything for Joker.
No.
And I feel like a defensive big is kind of like a luxury, and it's not necessarily something that's going to win you a title, where what Towns can do can actually Gobert wouldn't be 4. Gobert would be 5. Towns would be Towns. So then it comes down to Edwards, Towns, and Kyrie. Towns would be 4 for me, because now it's basically Kyrie or Ant, 1 or 2 or 3. Oh boy. I think I want to lean Ant, even though Kyrie has the resume. Kyrie had the great game 1. I think I'm leaning Ant, but
Yeah. So
I'm not
I
saying
think
it with
that
like a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, he's a much better defensive player than Kyrie. So when you factor that in, but I think that Kyrie is he's probably a better offensive player than Ant, just based on what he can do. Like Ant has he can dunk on anybody, but Kyrie probably has the same or similar field goal percentage in a restricted area, just because of the way what he can do in layups. Like when you look at all the types of weird ways he ends up putting the ball in the basket when he's going for a layup, it's just crazy. And he's a much more consistent 3-point shooter, and at the line, Kyrie shoots 80, 85, 90%. So it's just I think I would take Ant because he's a more complete player. Like he can still be that offensive fire. He can still have that firepower, but defensively he's still really really good. So I think I'd lean Ant 2, Kyrie 3, and then Towns firmly at 4.
So I look at these two teams, and I think starting 5 wise, when you add it all up, I'd probably slightly lean Minnesota because I just love 1 to 5 what they can roll out there. I'm a huge Conley guy. I just think he's the kind of player that he just feels like he should have already been on like 4 different championship teams. He's just a winning player. He makes winning plays, and he always affects the game in a positive way. And I look at the benches of these two teams, and you look at a player like Naz Reid, and tonight's a perfect example. Okay, he comes off the bench. He's 4 for 4 from 3-point. So on a game where Anthony Edwards is 3 for 11 from the field, you have Naz Reid as like this joker in your pocket that you can come out and play. It's very similar to what the Nuggets had last year in Bruce Brown. MPJ's having an off night. Here comes Bruce Brown off the bench. Bruce Brown is a steady hand. He's going to have a big game. They had the same thing in Jeff Green to a little lesser extent. The way they can get minutes from their bench in a positive way. I'm also a big fan, quite honestly, of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he's a somewhat dangerous player on their bench. Monte Morris doesn't get a lot of run for them. I'm still a big fan of him, but they got some pretty good guards there in Minnesota that play a lot of minutes. But here's what I would say. What was fascinating to me about game one, and it was obvious right away, the Timberwolves absolutely shook up the Nuggets offensive scheme with their ability to press the ball handler coming up the court. Game one and game two, the Nuggets just let Jamal Murray come up court, and they were in a full court press, and the Nuggets couldn't even get into their half court sets until about 10 seconds to go on the shot clock, and they were just winging it around and throwing up prayers, and it was terrible. And the Nuggets had to change their scheme up just to be able to get into their half court sets. Fast forward to this series, you had a Jamal Murray with a limited calf and KCP, who's not necessarily best skill at guard handling the ball. So fast forward to this series. Now you have Luka and Kyrie. That's a whole different world. And I know Luka's a little hobbled. Kyrie is a fantastic ball handler, and they're almost saying thank you when you try to play up on them and press them. And Kyrie had himself a very high level game one. And I think it had two different effects on it. One, it made Kyrie more aggressive, which had him have his best playoff game so far of this playoff season. And two, it wore out Ant Edwards on the defensive side of the ball to the point where in the second half, Stokes, he wasn't even trying to drive the basket. He was just settling for 3-point shots that weren't going in. This, to me, is a fascinating chess match because you know how playoff basketball goes. To assume that each game is going to be a copy and paste of the last game is just completely disrespectful to these coaching staffs. There's going to be counter adjustments and problem solving along the way. But what can the Timberwolves do in this situation to free up Ant from guarding Kyrie, or to give help to Ant with Kyrie, to allow him not to gas himself out defensively? And then you're relying on Jaden McDaniels hitting 66% of his 3-pointers just to keep you guys in the game. That's a variance that went in the Timberwolves' favor, and they still lost the game. There's a lot of reasons why I think that was a really bad loss for the Timberwolves, because a lot of the variance went in their favor. What can they do to give Ant some support other than saying somebody else, you're going to have to take Kyrie?
That would probably be it. Is change the way you want to defend. Like you can do more blitzing. You can do I wouldn't say switch, because if they get Kyrie on a big, there's going to be all over. But just trying to get the ball out of either Kyrie or Luka's hands and force the other guys to beat you. Force PJ Washington to hit 6 threes. Force Daniel Gafford to get a bunch of dunks, and have them try to throw the ball over Rudy Gobert. Like, force them to do all that stuff. Don't just let Kyrie and Luka run downhill and get in your bigs' chest and force them to either foul or give up a semi-easy layup. Like, those are just easy things for both of those guys. So we just got to force both of those guys to get the ball out of their hands, and then work on your scramble as much as you can. Work on the rotations, help the helper, all that other good stuff, just to make sure that you're making the quote unquote open shots a little bit tougher. But just force other guys to beat you, and of course that. In the end, like even if you blitz, they can't just whip the ball back around to whether it's Kyrie or Luka, and they're still going to affect the game. That's an impossibility to say you're going to take those guys out of it. But What you can do is just force keep them from taking as many shots as they did. And Kyrie, I don't think he's taking. He has 5 or 6 points so far in this first half. So obviously they made some adjustments, and now Luka is eating a little bit more. So they're playing better offensively, which is good. And Jaden McDaniels, whether you want to switch how he's who he's defending or how often they're switching off, so these guys don't get used to any specific person. Like if you're on the same person for the entire 40 minutes, you're gonna learn a few of the things that they're doing. But if you continue to switch it up, like that'll help keep them from, okay, I know exactly what he's going to do if I do this fake left and go right type of thing. But these are things that the coaches have probably been working on for the last 48 hours.
I mentioned some of the variants that I felt like really went in the Timberwolves' favor game one. I mentioned Jaden McDaniels. The last 3 games, so if you include game one and the last 2 games against the Nuggets, he's 12 for 18 from 3-point range. I mean, you talk about the ultimate 3-and-D guy. There may not be a better wing defender in the sport. I mean, he made the second team all defense in the NBA. He absolutely did whatever he wanted to the Nuggets. He is fantastic. He's a 33% 3-point shooter for the season. Right now, he's shooting 66 in the last 3 games. I don't know, Stokes, if this falls under a ride the hot hand. This is the kind of stuff that happens for championship teams, and they just get hot and they just carry them through. Or if this is a false positive that you can't rely on, you're going to have to find offense elsewhere. We shall see. But the inverse of that is Dallas in game one was 24% from 3. And they only attempted 25 3-pointers. And on the season, they averaged 38 3-pointers, and they're usually 37% for the season. So they're actually below on the variance scale. I do think Minnesota's fantastic, maybe definitely best defense in the league. We're talking about them now as, are they the best defense we've seen in a decade? Has a lot to do with that. They make it really tough to find good looks. So I'm not just going to say this was just variance. There's a lot that Minnesota does to take those shots away from you. But I would say I do think there's going to be games in this series, Stokes, where we don't see the Mavericks come away shooting 24% from 3. And those are the situations where, against this new and improved Mavericks defense since the trade deadline, can Minnesota keep up in a shootout scenario?
You would think that they are not likely to be able to keep up in a shootout because they don't really have that type of offense. Like I noticed like so many times when they were playing with the Nuggets, like they would come down and they would just run like dribble, hand off and all that other stuff until it's like, hey, 5 seconds. Oh, hey, Ant, hey, do something. Hey, Cat, do something. And then the Nuggets would do something similar because they're getting stressed with the ball. So they would like taking turns running out the clock and just trying to make something happen towards the end of the shot clock. So I do think that if the Mavs have a game where they're like 50% from 3 in the first half, they can blow the Timberwolves doors off because I don't think they have that type of offense to keep up with that output. So they're built on their defense. They're built on being able to control the pace because they have those 2 bigs who are if they're on the court at the same time, there is a mismatch somewhere. And for I had the lack of foresight. Just going back into round one, when we were talking about the Suns and how that would be a mismatch, and I didn't see that with the Wolves. But at any rate, they're always going to have a mismatch somewhere, or they're going to make you play out of your normal scheme because no one has 2 7-footers that they're just generally going to have out there. So if they can stay on the court together, they're gonna push people into bad positions. But if the other team is making shots, if they can get out and run, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for them. So it's if the game gets into 110s, 120s, I would say that the Wolves are probably going to get blown out.
So we are a game and a half into this series. I do think it's worth mentioning that despite being the 5 seed, you have to almost look at these Dallas Mavericks through a different lens, because the season as a whole, it's almost like they're a completely different team, because at the trade deadline, they acquired Washington, they acquired Gafford. Since the trade deadline on February 9th, the Mavericks have the third best record in the entire sport. They are second in the West, only one game behind the Oklahoma City Thunder, who ended up being the 1 seed. They're 21-9 since the trade deadline. That's tied with the Nuggets. So they are playing like a 1, 2, 3 seed since that point in time. And I really do feel like this is the kind of series that could go 6 or 7. I don't have a strong opinion. I'm certainly not going to overreact to one game. I do think the Jason Kidd thing makes me nervous. I do wonder what's going to happen late in this series if it gets to the point where now we've seen your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C. Do you have a plan D? But all in all, I like what the Mavericks have going right now. It's like they have that perfect combination you want this time of year, where they're desperate because, like, you want desperation. They're hungry, and they have guys that are proven in Kyrie, but it's almost like they're playing with house money too, because in a lot of ways, all season long, the West was about the Nuggets, the Thunder, and the Timberwolves, and maybe even the Suns, or for a while there was a Clippers phase everybody went through, but it was never the Mavericks that people were talking about. Maybe very early in the season, but now it's like they're just playing with house money, and there's a looseness that comes along with that, where I think Minnesota, there's some pressure that's going to start to build up on them. They've taken down the defending champs. They've taken down Kevin Durant's Celtics and or Suns in 4. You've got yourself to a situation where you feel like maybe it's our year, and then you go lose game 1 at home. I feel like pressure is much more on the Timberwolves in this spot, and that could only benefit a team like the Mavericks.
I can definitely agree there. I think that where it does benefit the Timberwolves is that they have basically two head coaches right now. So they have their actual head coach and the guy that's filling in, who is getting that experience as the decision maker. And that's helping have multiple minds in it. And another factor is uh, when they're talking about the games, they say, "Hey, just last series, we won 3 games on the road on their road court. We just got to win one to get it back." So when you look at it that way, I think you can get the pressure as off their minds, but not necessarily. Like, they're playing a lot differently as far as the freeness, as you mentioned, the Mavericks, that they had the house money as it is right now. Like, they weren't seen as the team that's going to make these big plays, or make a big run, because, as you mentioned, they weren't mentioned all season long. So it's I still think the Timberwolves are going to win this series, but this is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. I have a bet on Timberwolves -1.5 games, so I'm hoping it's 6. But I still think that the Wolves are gonna figure it out, especially on the road. But figuring out just means getting one extra game where you get things going right, because this is going to be a fun series, because they're both good teams, and when you have such talented players as Luca and Kyrie, you don't know whether it's going to be a game where Luca goes for 45 or Kyrie goes for 35, and there's just nothing you can do, because they can give you a sense of helplessness, where Luca does a step back, and you're like, how aren't they blocking his shot? Because he's jumping 5 inches off the ground, but they can't block his shot. So he'll just take a jump shot contested right in your face. Same way with Kyrie. And those guys, they're great equalizers in that sense.
The Wolves look like a championship team to me, the way they're built with veterans and spots you want. I mean, everybody talks about how young they are. I think that's just an ant conversation. I really do, because Towns is a veteran now, Gobert is a veteran now, Mike Conley's been around the block, Naz Reid is almost 40 years old. So I think this team is ready, and to me, they're just built really well. My heart tells me the Mavericks are going to win. That's probably just me being petty and wanting to see the team that took down the Nuggets lose. But man, my brain says that this Timberwolves team is almost like a team of destiny right now. So I think I'm with you. I think I'm going to go Timberwolves in 7. But this would not surprise me either way. And these games are just must watch TV. Which one do you think has the better shot? Just quickly, you don't have to get into it too deep because we'll have time to do it, to take down the Celtics. Or do you think both have a good shot?
I think that the Wolves have a much better opportunity to take them down,
Mhm.
just because of the mismatches they can provide on the Wolves offense. Like who do they think is going to guard Cat on the Celtics? I don't think it would be wise to put Horford on him. If you put Porzingis on Towns, it'll depend on what type of Cat you're going to get. Like, are you going to get Cat that's going to try and back him down and post him up? Or are you going to get the Cat that's going to try and shoot over him, which would be a terrible idea to try and shoot over a 7'3" guy out there on the perimeter. But when you look at the type of I think that the type of isolation sort of thing that Dallas does, I don't think that would be good for playing against the Celtics, because they are good defensively, and offensively they can shoot with anybody. So they can play in those shootouts, and they can then outshoot you. So I think that it would be a bad matchup for Dallas. Not that Dallas couldn't win it, because Dallas, I think, would have the best player on the court. But I don't. I think they would be a worse matchup for Boston, or worse matchup for Dallas being in the finals.
Completely agree. And I wonder if Minnesota does a similar thing to Boston game 1, where they really slow down their offense, if that jars Boston. Because I think Minnesota has the recipe on defense to really give their offense some trouble, as much as we've seen anybody give them trouble. And, we'll see what happens. It'll be fascinating. Let's talk about the teams that are no longer playing. Let's start with your New York Knicks, Stokes. I think they were probably the most fascinating team, that lost in the second round, because you want to just talk about what ifs. This is a team that lost game 7 at home. Don't worry, I can relate to that in my fandom. But along the way, just piling up so many injuries. And I think when you look at what the Knicks lost with, even it's almost like it was comical that, and comical is a bad word, but like by the end of it, they didn't even have Brunson on the floor. Um, they just ran out of bodies. I don't know if you want to get into a Thibodeau conversation. I hesitate to even like set you up too much, because I feel like you maybe just want to vent. So I just want to hear, what are your thoughts? What's the future look like for the Knicks? Because I see a team that's still, when all's said and done, they're going to be about 40 million shy of that second apron. They can be players this offseason if they make the right moves. What say you?
Yeah, I like what the Knicks have built. I like that they haven't, whether they have tried or have not tried. They've stuck to, for the most part, their plan of having accumulating draft picks, trying to pick up guys that fit what we're trying to do, rather than having a star come in and then fit around the star. Um, I really enjoy watching the Knicks. They're an enjoyable team to watch, because they have a bunch of guys who look like they're having fun playing the game, and it makes it easy to watch as a fan. And then other people can gravitate to that. Although sometimes Knicks fans can get pretty obnoxious, but it makes it fun as a fan. And knowing that they have a lot of flexibility for a lots of things going into this offseason, whether they go and try and get Donovan Mitchell, whether they go and try to get some other star that's disgruntled, or whatever the case is, they're going to have a lot of different options. And I don't want I also don't know what bringing a big star in how that would help, because I don't want Jalen Brunson to not be the guy, because like he's shown that he can carry the Knicks. And I just don't know how it would affect the offense if you bring in another guy, that's, if it's a guard or something like that, because they already play guys that are pretty small. They play Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, those guys. And if you add another guard, does that mean Dante's going to come off the bench? Does that mean Josh Hart's going to come off the bench? I don't know necessarily how that's going to affect the rest of the team. But they do need to bring back Hartenstein. I feel like he's a very important important piece of the puzzle. And of course, OG, we definitely need to bring him back. The Knicks were a much different team for the entirety of the time that OG was out there and healthy. I think that this run has somewhat solidified that maybe Julius Randle is not necessarily a guy that the Knicks need, and that he can be moved and the Knicks still feel okay. But watching that game 7 it was ridiculous and hilarious. Just the Pacers would not miss a shot. They were shooting 75% for the entirety of the first half. It was unbelievable. And when you lose like that, it makes it easier to accept. Well, there was nothing we could have done. The Knicks, I think they shot 45% or something like that, and that was it still wasn't enough because they were just too explosive as a team. So I'm not too the way it ended in Game 7. It was comical in the sense that they wouldn't miss, and then the Knicks just ran out of everything. But Thibodeau, he does what he does. He plays his guys how he plays his guys. He helped put together this team, and it makes it. I still like him as a coach. It's just one of those things.
Okay, Thibodeau's an interesting conversation because I think the injuries that the Knicks had in the playoffs were ridiculous, and I don't think they were a effect of the coach running his players into the ground. I think that's unfair, but it is a reality and it is a reputation Thibodeau has. And then my next question is, if the Knicks were to go big fish, or what's the big game hunting this offseason, and they were to go after someone like a Paul George or a Kevin Durant, would playing for Tom Thibodeau be a deterrent for a player like that? Could you see a player like Kevin Durant? I mean, this is kind of pie in the sky. I've seen articles that hint at what a trade would look like. I'm looking at one here: Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Dante DiVincenzo, and then 3 first-round picks. I mean, yeah, it would get it done, but I think, to me, when you want to talk about fit, that's the perfect player to pair with Brunson, because you don't have to take the ball out of Brunson's hands, and Kevin Durant can do his thing. He can kind of be the floor spacer, but also be way more involved than he was in Phoenix, where he was kind of just a floor spacer and got frustrated. And then you can rotate who's going to take the night off, and stagger the bench units with either one of those guys. There's a lot of things to get excited about. I mean, it's Durant and Brunson on the same team. Does the Tom Thibodeau factor give you pause about the ability to be able to recruit a star player, not a star player, a global superstar player like that?
I think it would be unrealistic to think that that's not a factor in a player's head. I don't know how it couldn't be. But you need Kevin Durant. He's a guy that he just says he loves to play ball. So whether that means he wants to play 42 minutes a night, that's part of the whole deal. But having a player like that would absolutely change the game for the Knicks. Just one of those guys that, hey, the clock's running down, we still need a good shot. And Kevin Durant, no matter who it is, he's going to get a good shot because no one can really guard him super effectively. They may be able to get a good play here and there, but by and large, you're not going to really affect him. So yeah, I think that would be a perfect thing. It would be sad as a Knicks fan to lose some guys that you've, of course, grown to really appreciate, like Dante DiVincenzo. I don't know whether the Knicks would be where they were without the way he played in the playoffs. Mitchell Robinson, he he's a fan favorite because he was a second round pick and we watched him develop as fans. And then of course Julius Randle, he was not the guy. He's not the guy. He was not the guy he is when he came to New York. So we watched that player develop. But I think I think as fans we'd be like, okay, well, Kevin Durant, sure, we sign this up for that. For what? Because Kevin Durant, I don't think he, aside from being active on social media, he's not really looking to do anything too special. Like he just loves to chill out and play basketball, and that's I think would be great for the Knicks. But also, we still need these players that are wanting to come here, and at the same time, these front offices that are willing to trade them. I know that Matt Ishby at the end of the season, he said that he wasn't trading any of the three players that the Suns have, and I get that makes sense. So then maybe Durant is not even available. But if he says, "Hey, I want out," then maybe that changes things. But there's just so much unpredictability with the way the Knicks are going this off season that I'm excited to see it. I think I can't see the Knicks just saying, let's just run it back and just say we're going to be healthier. I think that we're going to make some changes. It's just a matter of what happens.
I'm a firm believer that with this new CBA, that we're going to get away from seeing teams have sustained success with 3 max contract players, unless they just strike gold in the draft or strike gold with minimum free agent signings. But the Knicks are in this unique window with Jalen Brunson where he still has 2 years left on his deal he signed when he first joined the team, where he's about like 26 million against the cap the next 2 years. And he's going to sign a max extension this offseason, but that won't even kick in for a couple of years. They have this really unique opportunity where they could add a max contract to their team while they have a guy playing at a max level who's basically half of what a max player makes. It's almost like the rookie quarterback window in the NFL. So the Knicks are in a position where they can go for it without pushing their chips in and sacrificing the future. And when you factor in the fact that it's a New York market and it's a team that's hungry for success, and they've been into the second round of the playoffs the last 2 years, and they got so close they could sniff it this year to the conference finals. I get the vibes this is a team that's going to go for it. Now, whether Kevin Durant becomes available, who knows? Is it a situation where it is a Paul George? Are we looking at maybe a smaller scale move like a DeMar DeRozan, which I think, at least as far as like player fit with a team, would make a lot of sense. Um, I think the Knicks are going to go for it as much as they can this offseason. And I do think that the salary cap will allow them to do so. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder really quick, Stokes, because this is a team that they were the number 1 seed in the West. Everybody likes SGA. He was number 2 in the MVP voting behind Joker. The biggest concern about them going into this postseason was they're just a little bit too young. It's going to be Chet Holmgren's first postseason, and they did end up falling short. They got to the second round, lost to Dallas in 6. There is some frustration, I think, from their fans that the team they lost to was very aggressive at the trade deadline. And the Thunder elected to stay pat and just kind of trust the process, if you will, and continue to build. And did they potentially miss an opportunity where they had the number 1 seed and home court advantage throughout the entire Western Conference playoffs? What do you think about the future of this Thunder team? Are they going to be a team that's going to be reckoned with, or do you think this is a kind of one of those teams that we're high on now, but then when we start restacking the deck before next season, we're like, okay, maybe they're still like good, but I don't think I'm going to put them at the top of the West.
I think that this team has the opportunity to do just about anything that they're looking for because they have the pieces and the draft picks to do or make just about any trade because they can offer it. They can do like a Rudy Gobert type of deal if there was a Rudy Gobert type of player. So if it's they can offer a player like Josh Giddey and so, and then 5 first round picks because they have like 30 over the next 10 years or so. So they have so much draft capital that in draft capital that they really shouldn't spend because they have so many young players that they can if they're really looking to they can go out and try to make a big splash and see what type of player can fit with SGA. So I feel pretty confident in the way they can continue to build. They have a good foundation. They have a good a number one player in SGA. They have a pretty good number two in Chet Holmgren, and they have Jalen Williams as well. So if they have those three, if they were able to do anything, whether it's in the trade market or if they were to hit on another draft pick, if they use one, like they have the opportunities to continue to build and be good and be great. So I don't think their window is closed by any means.
Team that window I don't even think was necessarily open was the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a very big decision to make this offseason. They have a chance to trade Donovan Mitchell because he is up after the 2025 season, summer of 2025, and he's given no indication he wants to resign there. A team like the Rockets could make a lot of sense for him. They've been rumored to be hit with him. If they lose Donovan Mitchell, is this a point where the Cavaliers really just kind of go to the back of the line? Like, hey, you might make the playoffs, but it's not really going to matter much. Or do you think even if they keep Donovan Mitchell, unless they make another really substantial addition to this team, is this a team that's just kind of destined next year to be Eastern Conference decent, but not really going to move the meter as far as the NBA goes?
Yeah, I think the latter. They're just going to be a decent team, and nothing that they're going to do is going to be too special. Like even if they keep Donovan Mitchell, I think there's still a cap and a ceiling what they can be as a team. So I don't think that they're going to be a good enough squad. I mean, whoever they hire in as the next head coach and all that other good stuff. So I think that Donovan Mitchell will probably get moved. It would make sense for them to move him if they think that the guy is he's not committed to them long term. You should just move on and get what you can. So they should make a move and try to move forward with him, or rather without him. So and I think that it'll really depend on what type of coach they hire. If they hire a young head coach, an up and coming head coach, I can see them trying to then rebuild that from the ground up. But if they hire like a retread that has who has an older guy who has a window where they're trying to win now, then that will probably be how they build their squad.
What if they hire JJ Redick because he's LeBron's guy, and then they draft Bronny?
Hey, I mean, it is so interesting that whole thing because like people are attributing so much to LeBron, like having said, "Hey, if you draft my son, I will go to your team." He's never said anything to that effect, but people are saying, "Well, I mean, LeBron said he's going to do it. LeBron said he wants to play with his son. Okay, that's great." But that doesn't mean he's going to come to your squad if you're a bad team just because you draft Bronny. No, he's going to do what he's going to do, and that's great. But he's doing wonders for his son. More power to him, I guess.
It's just it aligns with everything about LeBron James' career. The myth and the story is always so much more entertaining than the reality. It's so much better to talk about LeBron as like somebody that hasn't somehow lived up to the hype when the reality is he's probably the second best player to ever play the sport, and he's won everywhere he's been. But don't get me off on that tangent, Stokes. Don't get me off on that tangent. This game has gotten a lot closer, by the way, 75-70 as we get close to the fourth quarter. We're going to get out of here in a second. Let's hit on the Denver Nuggets. The defending NBA champions will not be repeating as NBA champs as they fell to the Minnesota Timberwolves after blowing a 20-point second half lead in Game 7 on their home court. Just really ran out of gas. Stokes, my read on this situation is there's a lot of frustration with Nuggets fans, Nuggets reporters. I think they're viewing this team and the way the season ended as a failure. And while I respect that, I understand the frustration of, oh, it's a failure. And, oh, now we have the Timberwolves in our way. And, you can start thinking like Jamal Murray, for the first time in his Nuggets career, was not playoff Jamal. The light switch just didn't flip when the playoffs turned around. And it's like a guy that's not really good enough to be an all-star all of a sudden gets to the playoffs. He looks like he's all NBA. The calf injury had something to do with that. second year in a row in the last memory we have, the last series of the season, even though it was a title win last year, Michael Porter Jr. leaves us wanting way more from a shooting standpoint. And then I think there's temptation now do you trade a Jamal Murray? Do you trade a Michael Porter Jr.? What happens if KCP leaves? And I would just tell all Nuggets fans, relax. Okay. You were a 20-point collapse against the Minnesota Timberwolves at home away from being in the Western Conference Finals, which means this team is good enough to win it all. If you trade a Michael Porter Jr., this team that's probably going to lose KCP because he's going to opt out is already going to struggle from a floor spacing standpoint. You're going to trade away one of the best shooters in the NBA and hope to get somebody back that becomes as good as him. And I also think it's such a prisoner of the moment to look at a player like Michael Porter Jr., who had a admittedly really bad series against the Timberwolves. Important note, the Timberwolves kept McDaniels on him the entire series. They watched the Lakers series and said, this guy is not going to beat us. That was either a sign of disrespect to Jamal Murray or a sign of respect to Michael Porter Jr. Not an excuse. That's a nod of respect to Michael Porter Jr. I think the Nuggets need to continue to push forward with what they have. Don't make any rash decisions. I don't expect them to. I think they're going to continue with this process they have. Michael Porter Jr. is their third max guy. But Stokes, I think in these moments, it's very easy in the emotional aftermath of a tough loss, especially a collapse like that just really makes you feel like, what if? It's really easy to make a rash decision. And I feel like the best path forward for these Nuggets is just like, let's take a step back. Let's build internally. Let's make some better decisions in the regular season next year. Maybe we aren't going to push Joker to have the second most minutes in the sport behind only Tatum. Maybe let's prioritize finding a better big man on the bench besides Zeke Naji and 50-year-old DeAndre Jordan that we can trust to play those backup Joker minutes. And let's trust the fact that despite losing in the second round, we probably still had a top 4 team in this league, and we're only potentially losing our 5th best starter. And let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I think it would definitely, as you said, it would be rash to decide to trade whether Michael Porter Jr. or Jamal Murray. Like they had a 20-point lead. Like they were in a position to be at home for this series that is being played currently. So they don't need to do anything too crazy. They can continue to play as they are and just build, like you said, have someone that can give Joker a couple minutes on the bench. Like he was extremely gassed in that game 7, just taking threes, and have another player that you can trust that's going to make a decision when Jamal Murray isn't able to, or when Joker is off the court. Like, Joker, he can handle a large load for the offense, but if there's an opportunity for you to not have that be the decision, that should be the decision. It's getting rid of Jamal Murray. That would be a non-starter for me, because it would be difficult for you to get a player that is better than Jamal Murray. So that wouldn't be the decision I would try to make. And Michael Porter Jr., he's a great player. He's obviously inconsistent, but he provides a lot of things that when you're trying to build a basketball player for this type of NBA, he fits a lot of those things. He checks a lot of those boxes. So I just can't see a situation where you're going to get players that are better than these players. And depth is what they should be focusing on, in my opinion.
I'm with you. I think the Nuggets will be back next year. I think the Thunder will be back. I think they'll both have a lot to say about what happens in the Western Conference Finals. I'm fascinated to see, Stokes, what your Knicks do this offseason. To me, they are as interesting as any team in the entire sport, outside of the decision of what goes on with LeBron, which I fully expect him to stay in LA, just based on what he has going on there business-wise and financially. Although him finishing his career in New York and winning a title with the Knicks would just make even the most haterish of LeBron haters have to at least applaud him, although they'd still make an excuse that Michael would have never needed Jalen Brunson. You know how it
Sure.
goes. We're going to pretend like Michael never played with Scottie Pippen, apparently. All right, Stokes, this was fun. Let's go watch the end of this Timberwolves Mavericks game, and we will be back hopefully with Magic, who has a very good reason of missing this show. Had some very exciting personal news. Well, hopefully he'll talk about it on the show coming up next. Before the NBA Finals, we'll be back to preview that, give our predictions. And Stokes, you think it's going to be Timberwolves Celtics. I said it's going to be Timberwolves Celtics. If the Timberwolves end up blowing this lead, I am going to edit that out of the show and say that I said it was the Mavericks. I'm not too proud to do that. But for Stokes,
Mavericks all the way.
Go Mavericks, go Mavericks. For Stokes, I am Josh McCarty, and we will see you next time on NBA Chat.